Okay, so questions for any of this group? Where can we start? We'll start right here, and then over here with Reed.
I was just wondering if the Morris affidavits and the Jensen interviews are available to the public.
I'm so glad you asked. Because I forgot, I brought this book up to show you and I forgot to hold it up. Yes, this was published by Richard Turley and Ronald Walker, two of the authors of Massacre at Mount Meadows, and it was published in 2009, I believe, Rick. And inside of it, it's a documentary history. I think it won Mormon History Association's best document.
One that Utah State Historical Society best document.
Utah State Historical Society best document. So you can see it has pictures, holographs of the action, every single piece of paper that was in both collections, and then a transcript of both. And then it also has historical information about each of the people who gave the affidavit. So it's a fantastic book. Is it still in print?
It's not listed. You can usually find it.
Yeah, you can find it online. So it's a fantastic book. So.
I was just wondering, Tony, how those sandwiches tasted when you had a cold. It really is to me.
Yeah, thanks.
You know, Mom wasn't really a great cook. But we played on often. I remember Dr. Norman Fawson advised us. We invite him over and feed him onion sandwiches. He didn't like them much. We got to work. I didn't want to complain because I'm afraid Dad would quit making them.
Got a question for Richard. This may be more about Dale Morgan than Juanita, but why was Dale Morgan so generous with Juanita in terms of sharing the Mountain Meadow stuff? Because he did the same thing with her on the Hosea Stout Diaries. Yep. Was he generous with other scholars as well, or was
he
just
was
the relationship?
Known for that? Yeah, when he found, in fact, there was Carl Yost, who was a California trail historian. Actually, in the front of his books, in his introduction to this document, said, "This really ought to be Dale Morgan's book, not mine." But he did that for anybody. I mean, and he actually said once upon a time, he says, I've never lost anything by being generous. And I think there's a really good lesson in that.
That's an idea. Let me call me one time too.
Hi.
Dale and Mom were really, really close. He would come to our home and spend literally weeks. And so he was really important in all of Mom's writing. And encouraging her, I think, was the main thing. She was not as enthused about her own work as she should have been.
I would add that I don't think Juanita Brooks could have done it without Dale Morgan.
I don't either.
Hey, question right here.
I'm excited to hear that you're honest the Juanita Brooks Museum. We learned about it today.
I'll
actually answer that one.
Okay.
So the city owns the house, Juanita's house, and the house next door, and they already own the property, but there's a woman that still lives there. She's aging, and part of the deal was she gets to stay until she can't stay. And then they will begin a restoration process. That house will be taken back to the 1954 edition that Juanita and Will built themselves. So the rock house is an original structure built by hand by George Brooks, and then Will and Juanita added the addition in 1954. It will go back to that version. The city owns the properties. You're welcome to go up and walk the grounds of both homes, and eventually it will all become not just the museum, but an interpretive center and historic park. And in our newsletter, we'll just continue to give updates, and it's all part of the historic district now of St. George. And so all of that is going to be owned and run by the city. And the museum will not just be a museum to Juanita Brooks, but it will be a museum for Southern Utah in general. And we're in the process of curating exhibits, doing interviews, gathering information. We have several projects going on. We can talk about that later, but that's kind of an update about coming museum.
Actually, the Snow property across the street is also going to be part of that. That's a lot of it.
We're helpful.
So I've known Tony for about 40 plus years. I met him in Kennewick, Washington, and I grew up LDS and never heard anything about the Mountain Meadow Massacre until Tony introduced it to me. And as I was listening today to the presentations, I knew about the trips and research that Juanita did looking for journals to support her writings, and then hearing about the affidavits that the church had. Are they in line with the journals? Are the same people mentioned in the affidavits? Are they found in the journals? What can you say about that? I mean, Turley's here too, Richard's here too, so
Now, so.
do you understand what I'm asking?
Yes, I do. So Juanita Brooks had very few firsthand accounts in her work in her book from massacre participants. So very few. In fact, when she couldn't get the Morris collection, she was heartbroken. She said, well, I do have one affidavit from Nephi Johnson, but she was kind of sick that she couldn't. She said, I dearly wanted to have those affidavits from participants themselves.
So what does the journal provide then? What could she with?
Well, there's, like anything, there's more than just that part of the story. Juanita in 1935, 36, 37 ran a Federal Emergency Recovery Act program in St. George that paid women who could type or transcribe. She would go out, gather up pioneer journals, bring them back. Her neighbors would end up transcribing them. So many of those had nothing to do with the massacre. They were just local history diaries. But we have them, and many of them have since disappeared, so all we have is the transcripts. So she did that, so she collected that in the 30s. 1935, she finds the first-hand account called the Bull Valley Snords 35? Yeah. Okay, Bull Valley Snort document. John Higbee, yeah. And then another document she finds in 1936 or 37 really begin the process of her thinking, I want to do something about this. But after that, then she started collecting material and forwarding documents to the Huntington Library down in California. So she would send them down there, they would photostat the documents, send back the originals. The copies would go to the family along with the originals. So the Daughters of Utah Pioneers twisted it around a bit and said, somebody is taking our treasured documents out of state. And it wasn't the case. But she was a godsend. And actually, she was the one who connected the church historian's office with the Huntington. And when those of us, if you look at the Utah newspaper, digital newspaper project, all of those Deseret News, early Utah newspapers that were digitized were actually filmed by the Huntington because the church didn't have the equipment to do it in the 1950s. And that's another interesting way to count. So when you look at Latter-day Saint history and primary source material, it really goes down to Juanita Brooks in a lot of ways for more than just the Mountain Meadows Massacre.
And I should add that the richest source that she had from a massacre participant was, of course, the John D. Lee journals. And they were at the Huntington. And she does the transcripts and annotates them with Robert Gladys Cleland and publishes them as the journals of John D. Lee. So she did have access to most of those.
One story that Mom told us, I'm sure everybody might know this already, but when she was a young lady, you could teach school as soon as you graduated from high school. She was teaching school in Bunkerville, Nevada. This old gentleman caught her one day and says, my eyes have seen something that I have never written down. Would you please come, school teacher, and write it down for me? Well, she was, young and dainty and didn't get back. Well, then he was dying, and he was lying on his deathbed screaming, asking for the little school teacher. Quick, come! Well, she went, and he passed away. What was he screaming about, she says? Well, of course, he was at the Mountain Meadows Massacre. That was probably one of the first times she had ever heard about the massacre. And one of the times that she felt very bad, she didn't follow what she wanted. They did opportunity.
Real question. That man was Levi Johnson. And so again, those two affidavits from Levi Johnson were in the Morris collection. So that's why I said it must have been agonizing for her to know she couldn't get those. She did have another affidavit of his. And I just wanted to add that this story that Tony just shared is the story that we close Vengeance is Mine. That's the last story in the book. We close with that dramatic story. Then
Ryan, I have a question for you. So you talked about in your presentation about you're going to go back through Juanita Brooks's works and find the sources and annotate the books. You're not changing the text of the book, but you're going to annotate it. Which one are you working on, and how on earth are you doing this? That sounds impossible. How are you doing it? Which one?
It's On the Ragged Edge. It's her biography of Dudley Levitt, who's also my great-great-great-grandfather. And I have this is probably my connection, strongest connection to her, because my grandfather would tell me stories about Dudley Levitt. And I just thought that he knew these, but turns out they were all from this book, that he had just read the book. He didn't hear it from his father or from his grandfather. And so, but still, even knowing that, I appreciate it even more, just the fact that he was interested enough to learn those stories, to be able to tell them to me as well. How I'm doing it, she didn't cite like she did for Mountain Meadows in this biography, and it was her intention to do that in the rewrite, as I talked about. But she did mention 3 journals, and so I've got those journals, going through and seeing what I can find in those. But like I said, there's probably going to be things that she heard about this from her aunt so-and-so, and she sometimes even says, like, I heard from an aunt or from one of Dudley's daughters or something like that, this story. But she doesn't say who, and I'm sure it's not written down. It's something that she just overheard. But so it'll be difficult, but I have found things in the Church History Library archives that I know that if she had access to at the time, she would have used that material in these books. So I'll be adding those into the footnotes as well.
Will you be republishing the book
Yes.
with annotations? And
Yes.
what's your time frame?
I don't know. It depends too on rights. On the Ragged Edge the rights are held by the Utah State Historical Society, which I've talked to them, and they said as long as the family's willing, they're willing to kind of. I don't know how it would work exactly. I'm not a publisher. Maybe Barbara knows better, but yeah. So hopefully soon. I'm probably about halfway through the book of doing this, so. Thanks.
I'd love to publish that book, Ryan. Let's talk.
Okay, we have time for maybe one more question. Anybody has anything else?
Yeah, one.
Okay, there's a guy back here. Okay.
No, that's fine.
This is actually Mitchell Schaefer. He works for Utah Historic Sites, just so you all know.
Man.
Church Historic Sites. Quinn, this is for Dr. Saunders. I'm curious what kind of your observations are, thinking about the broader patterns and the shift from consensus in American history to new history. What are the similarities you've noticed and differences with the shift in the Mormon history as well?
If I start now, we can probably be out by Friday. Historiography, historiology, which is the philosophy of history, shifts and changes dramatically over the 20th century. You'll find some, if you're interested, in the Morgan biography, because I talk about it there. I don't know that there's a short version, other than there were 2 or 3 really major intellectual shifts in the United States in history. One of them happens in the mid to late 1960s. It's called the Social History Revolution. And that's where historians bring new tools like numbers and textual analysis and geography and other things that historians really hadn't used before. The Social History Revolution came at the height of the baby boom, okay? And has been kind of tapering off since that. And we're going into some new things, artificial intelligence being one of them. Learning to use new tools to look at things in a different way. Prior to that, The major shift is really the GI Bill. Between the late 1930s, early 1940s, the old stories just don't hold water anymore. The United States is too complex. I mean, ethnic groups are saying, well, wait a minute, you can't leave us out of the story. And that kind of feeds into things that happens at the same time. Now, at roughly the same time, in the 1950s and 1960s, traditional publishing companies had invested heavily in textbook publishing because textbooks used to be published by commercial publishers, not by textbook publishers, not by scholarship. So as that happens, they become enormously profitable in the post-war boom in students. And that's where Wall Street takes an interest in publishers, and you start seeing this conglomeration of, that's where Random House, for instance, takes over Alfred A. Knopf and dozens of others. It's a huge subject. The other thing that happens that's very interesting at roughly the same time is the rise of academic publishers like the University of Utah Press, for instance, which really only gets its start after the war as they're trying to bring new things out that don't have a big commercial market, but they're still interesting and useful. So I'd be happy to tell you some more details, but that is such an enormous topic. I can't even fairly put it justice. I'm afraid.
Okay, one last question right here. Okay, all right. And if you have, there's another one in the back. Oh.
Can I just say thank you for all the presenters and all the organizers for this fascinating day?
Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate everybody coming. And if you would like to come back for the meet and greet and ask the presenters more questions, meet them, talk to them, please do. Come back at 5:45, and then we'll spend some time together before we go to the lecture series. Also, if you'd like to know a little more about each one of our presenters today, you can click the QR code on the bottom of the posters, and all the bios are there. And you can read a little bit more about their scholarship and experience and how they've contributed not just to the Juanita Brooks history, but to vast amounts of history and education way beyond the state of Utah. So again, another big hand for all of our presenters today. So